Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much to the team for that illuminating conversation there. I had indicated earlier on that we've had to sort of, instead of having two sessions running parallel, we've had to sort of step the sessions, one behind the other. It means that we now have the time that we would have saved, we now have spread it. So it means that the panels have got to just cooperate with me even more. Now I'm going to ask the next panel to come to the front, which is led by moderator Dr. Ekemini Basi, Eta Okon, who, Doc, welcome. Sorry to mispronounce your name, from Wits. And then he'll be, please come forward, all the people of this, Dr. Gabriel Nguijol, lecturer, Cameroonian Institute. Okay, you coming here? Okay. Prof. Jonathan Makuwira, please come forward, and Prof. Gabriel Uketo Moti. Thank you so much. You just look at this piece of paper. That will guide you the way forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, as he said, my name is Ekemini Eyita Okon. I am an academic here at Wits, but based at the Wits School of Governance. And today, my panel will be tackling the issue of Africa in global politics, and we'll be discussing Africa's agency within global politics broadly. So first up to present is Dr. Gabriel Nguijol. He's from the Cameroonian Institute of Diplomatic and Strategic Studies in Cameroon, and his paper or presentation is titled East African Community or Community of East African States in New Great Game, Positioning Central Africa as the Catalyst for African Sovereignty in a Multipolar World. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Nguijol from Cameroon. First of all, apologize for, I'm very much comfortable in French language. Cameroon is not just the long reign of our president on power. It's also about multiculturalism and the bilingual nature of our country. That is, it has two colonial languages, French and English. So French represents 80% of the country's language, and English is just 20%. So my apologies for my English, that's not to say. Thank you. So to have my presentation that is entitled ACSUS as a catalyst for African agency in the multipolar world. So I had an image that I prepared. I don't know. Sorry? I think Kabas who sent. Okay. So I would have loved the image to be presented there. Well, when I prepared my topic, I prepared also a slide, but when I listened to the keynote that was presented here on the first day, I was inspired by a concept that I used in my presentation. The concept was the potential of that, in that anecdote that was used by Mr. Brian here, who showed us how the young man keep on telling to his girl how he had the potential to, you know, and he later on died without showing his potential. So I thought of developing a concept which is the new great game. What's the new great game all about? For me, the new great game reflects this not old man, but this young lady that we used to have in our neighborhood, in our environment, that was very beautiful, attractive, and everybody was running after her, and everybody was interested with this young lady. But what is important is not the fact that people were interested or running behind this young lady. It's what the young lady had to do with the fact that many young guys, were running after her. So that is, for me, the new great game, the African new great game, or what I can call the new scramble for Africa. The new great game reflects, you know, the continent's growing strategic importance in global geopolitics, global international economy, and global importance framed by a complex interplay of competing interests over resources, market influence, or control through what have been set here, through FDIs, to security cooperation, through trade, and all the rest. So Africa has become this focal point for strategic competition where traditional powers are being challenged by new ones, including, you know, the Gulf states, Russia, Turkey, India, and all the rest. So my understanding of the African Agency is not about resisting to this scramble for Africa. It's not about rejecting these competing powers. More still, is about, you know, it's about more about institutional, you know, leveraging this institutional solidarity, resistance, financial autonomy, collective negotiation. In fact, it is about the developing a strategic choice to collectively manage our potential or our resources. So, the question of my presentation, the main question is, why Central Africa and how Central Africa? Yeah, when we talk of Central Africa, the literature about the region, most of the literature, geopolitical literature about the region is based on conflict, political instability, destabilization, and all the things you know. But Central Africa is not just about instability, insecurity, destabilization, political, you know, long reign of our leaders. And Central Africa is one of the Africans region with exceptional concentration of natural resources, especially the blue economy. It holds one of the best African blue economy, green economy, and it holds critical mineral resources. But when it comes to blue economy, you know, Central Africa represents about 1.5 million tons of fish annually, representing more than 20% of the total catch in Africa. It is the second after West Africa maritime trade volume through waterway, but lead in Africa hinterland waterway potential thanks to the Congo Basin. Central Africa, when it comes to green economy through its Congo Basin, represents more than 200 hectares in terms of rainforest, which is the second largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon. Central Africa accounts for about 1.5 billion tons of annual carbon dioxide. You know, it's a very great carbon sink that is important for renewable energy. You know, climate change is one of the most topic or important critical topics that have been raised here, that is have been raised in the world. Central Africa is also a critical mineral reserve that was presented yesterday by one of our panelists here. It supplies the world with over 80% of global cobalt. That is, DRC alone represents 70% of the world's cobalt produced. It represents about 80% of Africa's coltan, a large market of about 220 million people. It's 40% of Africa's population, so it's a very great market for Africa. Central Africa, yes, can serve as a catalyst for African agency, not just because it has all these potentials, but because it should and can leverage all these resources. But the question is how? How can Africa manage or leverage all these resources? Central Africa can leverage these resources by collectively managing its abundant natural resources. Why collectively? Because people will tell me, but the resources belong to particular state. When I was preparing my presentation, I was guided by a geopolitical approach, a critical geopolitical approach that is more about, rejecting this mainstream approach of promoting national or mainstream geopolitical knowledge that or practices on state strategies and territorial control. It emphasizes more on promoting geopolitical ideas or social construction of geopolitical ideas, which are socially constructed out of our cultures, knowledge, principles, and all the rest. So one of the principles that guided me is the principle of African principle of solidarity that is found in our main topic. So I thought, yes, in order for Central Africa to be a catalyst or position itself as a catalyst of African agency, It should first of all collectively leverage its abundant natural resources by building a resource strategy or harmonize resource governance. Through its institutional body called ACSUS, ACSUS has started reflecting or discussing with one of the other regional body that exists in Central Africa, that is CEMAC. They've started discussing, thinking of how to harmonize or rationalize the institutions and create one institution that will more represent the region on the international scene. So I think Central Africa, through its institutional regional body, can or should adopt a common resource charter to present fragmented negotiations and prices on external actors, adopt regional oversight mechanism for contract and concession to ensure transparency. Central Africa should also leverage regional integrity, solidarity, and sustainability through accelerating of completion of corridors, under construction of new ones, because some have started being constructed, such as the N'Djamena-Douala corridor, or the Pont Noir in Gabon and Congo-Brazzaville corridor. Create new ones in order to link all the 11 states that constitute the region. Central Africa to adopt a community-centered development model that will expand participatory governance model where local communities benefit directly from mining and forest revenue. I think a community approach was largely developed here yesterday. That was trying to show how the communities can directly benefit from these mining exploitations and through development projects like schools and all the rest. So Central Africa can enhance regional climate diplomacy and green energy. I've shown the potential on this issue. Leveraging all this potential will position ACSUS as a carbon sink leader to forest conservation and hydropower expansion, will permit ACSUS to use climate finance mechanisms to turn ecological assets into bargaining power, creating sustainable local currency. Central Africa is about 6 currencies, with the franc CFA being used by 6 countries of the SMAC region. Others are using other currencies. So Central Africa should collectively maybe create a common currency that will permit the region to position itself in the African quest for agency. Globally, I think ACSUS has laid some foundation to promote African agency. I think since the laying down of the Agenda 2063, ACSUS is one, if not the only sub-region that has revised its founding treaty that was in 2019 to align with the objectives of Africa, or the objectives of, or the aspirations of Agenda 2063. So I think Central Africa has started positioning itself as one of, or if not the catalyst of African agency. So Central Africa represents what in this image that I'm trying to project. Africa is that beautiful woman that everybody is running after. You see traditional powers, England, US, France, and all the rest. There are emerging ones that have been also, that are coming. We have, Brazil was trying to to enter into Africa this money. We have China, India, and all the rest. But what does Central Africa represent in this image? I think Central Africa represents the best thing a woman can have on her body. Thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. Definitely appreciate the idea of trying to capitalize on Central Africa's potential. But of course, the question remains how to, actually leverage on all of these great things that you've highlighted. But also noting one of the biggest problems that we have in the continent is being able to manage collectivity or collectivism and bridge that against the issue of sovereignty. So, but great points were raised here. All right, next up we'll have Prof. Jonathan Makuwira, and he is a professor of development studies in Malawi University of Technology, and he'll be talking to Trumpism, global geopolitical reconfiguration, and Africa's agenda. Prof.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's the topic that I would like to share with you, colleagues, this morning. I must admit that in my entire career, this has been a moment of confusion. Perhaps after this, I might take a bit of retirement. But this is about Trump and Trumpism. Let me start by reflecting on an article that appeared in the Le Monde. This French magazine, and it was written by Valentine Faure. She starts by saying Trumpism is a political phenomenon that defies all definition. But she goes on to say, and she starts by asking a question, is it techno-libertarian? Is it isolationist, fascist? Or is it plutocratic, populist? She finishes by saying the politics of the 47th US president are impossible to pin down. While some compare his approach to certain European regimes, others argue it should be understood strictly within an American context, even if that means inventing a new term. Why did I choose this to begin with? I'm pretty sure many of us have been asking questions. Why would America choose Trump twice? And I want to go back to saying, let's move beyond Trump and understand America as a society. That's my point number one. But maybe what is Trumpism? Well, there are several definitions that people can talk about. But if you just Google, there's one thing that will come out, that Trumpism as a theory or practice of politics is indeed difficult to pin down because it appears to present patterns and loosely linked ideologies that come to resemble something that begins to look like a worldview. Why a worldview? The behavior that we see in Trump and what we have seen in the media and the way he acts even with other states, regions, and leaders of the world is something that is very unusual. And for me, it represents something that we need to be curious about because of the influence America has globally. We've been talking about it since, a day before yesterday. So you see something to do with economic nationalism and establishment, polarization of politics, the idea of America first, media skepticism, immigration reactionary kind of behavior, rhetorical kind of divisiveness. All these are leading to a kind of political realignment. I think we'll appreciate what has happened just a couple of days ago when he decided not to join the G20. Now, if you believe and understand how power works, actually, his absence is an exercise of power. He's conveying a message. And that, to me, is very critical in understanding Trumpism and what this is all about. Is it becoming more of an ideology? Like Wallace Soyinka said, we must delve deep into understanding this particular individual, even from an academic point of view. But in summary, Trumpism is an anti-establishment blend of economic populism, reactionary nationalism, and a strong military summed up in Trump's campaign slogan of making America great again. If we said today, let's make Africa great again, I don't know whether that will make any sense. Or shall we say, let's make Africa, first, or Africa first. But what we are seeing in him is something to do with transactionalism, unilateralism, isolationism, even demonizing ideologies, and leveraging on economic agenda. So this is more of Trump in general. But in my paper, I indicated that is this particular figure shifting geopolitical realignment? I think the answer is yes. There is significant shifts, or there are significant shifts in Trumpism. One is that if you look at the so-called multipolar world, which is not true, rather, let's say, polycentrism, because multipolarity signals or signifies that there is some equality in power, yet it is not what we are seeing today. What we are seeing is polycentrism, where there are overlaps of people with different or varied power, in one form or the other. So what is the major trigger of global geopolitical reordering? Number one is Trumpism himself. A good example is what we saw a couple of days ago. His absence as an exercise of power definitely has its own ripple effects globally. Secondly is the issue of migration and refugees. Obviously, what we are seeing in America today is something that will have its own ripple effects globally. And sadly, right here in South Africa, it is happening. Now, what does that symbolize in terms of understanding politics and other things? The other shift is from multilateralism to transactional bilateral diplomacy, where he's moving away from all these multilateral institutions to create his own way of dealing with issues. That's why he cut off aid through USAID. Many African countries, of course, cried. But if we are clever, if we understand politics, this was way overdue. In fact, after all, Dambisa Moyo talked about it, that if one day, for example, African countries received a letter from many of their bilateral donors saying, okay, from January 2026, no more aid, what is going to happen? Life will go on. And for me, this is something that I think is something that perhaps will begin to shift the way politics in Africa must be understood, and even in academic terms. Free trade to economic nationalism, we are seeing the way the tariffs are being imposed on countries today, tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So what this Trumpism or Trump is doing is to create his own ideology. And for me, that is something that we should be interested in. How do we deal with that kind of behavior, which seemingly seems to be an ideology, a kind of an ensemble of thinking that will have to shift the way we do things? How is Africa going to deal with that? Fortunately enough, Africa has its own power base, what we have been talking about as an agency, okay? 1.5 billion people, projected to be perhaps 2.5 billion by 2050, okay? A market value of some point, almost close to 3 trillion. That's huge. But our endowment in terms of resources cannot be explained. We've been talking about this. Can we utilize that as our agency, a bargaining instrument? You know, 40% of resources essential for global transmission are right here in Africa. And I could go on and on and on. But the question is, what's the strategy if we can leverage on that to deal with this new ideology called Trumpism? We've been talking about one voice. Others have been suggesting about Africa Unite, like Bob Marley said many, many years ago. I think yesterday there was a critical discussion on re-examining the role of the African Union in economic and political terms. Is it serving its purpose? Or is now time has come to reflect and realign with the current nature of politics? Lastly, in my presentation I was saying, now we have as Africa our Agenda 2063 versus Trumpism. How do we ensure that we pursue our agenda to the end, at the same time dealing with the elephant in the room? How do we do that? On the one hand, we're saying we want inclusive growth. We want an integrated continent, politically united, and yet divisiveness is on the horizon through Trumpism. How do we handle that? Isolationism, we are talking about partnerships here. How do we handle this? A peaceful and secure Africa. We've been talking about so many players now, the so-called the new scramble for Africa, through arming militias and so on and so forth. How do we reconcile this? There's so many things that I think out of my total confusion I could be talking about. But I'm glad, like one philosopher said, confusion is the beginning of all knowledge. For without confusion, people will never come to clarity. I want to finish by saying, if there has never been a moment when Africans have to make a painful decisions, this is the moment. Sadly, we tended to go to say, our leadership, our leadership. The question is, how do we make Africa's leadership talk with one voice? This has been our major challenge, despite the efforts. I have no answer. I'm glad I'm here to reason together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your presentation. Definitely something worth reflecting on, particularly how we navigate and marry, or if there even is a need to marry, Africa's Agenda 2063 and the ongoing ideology shaping global political economies, which is Trumpism. But I'm glad you ended up talking about the African elephant, which is also dealing with the divisiveness within the continent. Leaders having a different agenda to what is in Agenda 2063, signing, ratifying something, and then behaving in a different way. And so the dynamic between the behavior and what we see in reality are in stark contrast. So that, for me, is the African elephant that you may want to include in the paper as well and dissect that elephant. But thank you very much for your presentation. Up next, we've got Prof. Gabriel Moti. and he is the Dean from the Department of Public Administration from the University of Abuja, and his presentation will be on Africa's problems and solutions, balancing equality and influence with interest of super and emerging powers. Prof, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start with this. There is this story I heard from a Kenyan parliamentarian, and it's good that the last panel before us was dominated by the Kenyans. Now, he's told us, and I heard that an African wanted to find out where he will be, either in heaven or hell. And so he went to heaven and saw that everything was well ordered, like he had the streets gold. And he said, but let me have a peep into hell. He went to hell and he discovered also that it was very ordered. There was life, very groovy. The streets were good. He didn't see the man with the horns that they say is the devil. You saw the picture the Kenyans showed us. So he went back. And when he came for the second time, and it was opportunity now to pick where to belong, he said, but hey, it's good, let me go there. So he went to hell. And so when he got there, he didn't see the grooviness again. The man who ushered him and showed him the beautiful street had horns, was very, very callous, and he was very disappointed. And he said, where am I? They say, you are in hell. They said, no, the last time I came here, it wasn't like this. And they answered him, you came when we were campaigning. So, and that is the problem with African governance. We give a very good picture when we are campaigning. When we get the power, governance goes off. And we are back to where we are. And so I want to play the devil's advocate before I summarize. Is Africa static? No. Is Africa where we want to be? Not yet. Can we get there? Perhaps. And that is why we are here. When? I don't know. And so, for me, I think we have to characterize African agency by saying that it is an agency within constraints. It's an agency within constraints. And some of these constraints are these concerns. Are we sure that these superpowers and emerging powers take our leaders seriously when they engage with them? Brian gave us something, the star boy. I'm going to end with that. Is it possible that our leaders can take opportunity of these issues that we're discussing? Shall we continue as passive recipients? Another one is looking at what happens in governance in many African countries, which I have had opportunity to also visit. Indeed, on Sunday, I'll be going to Eswatini for a PAM conference where many African bureaucrats are going to be there. Are our leaders not using this agency as an opportunity for their own interests? Considering that they are, you saw what was happening yesterday concerning the AU, so many parallel engagements. Have we ever documented and calculated the cost it takes an African president to go to all this and come back? Is our agency looking at decolonization of our education? Because that is where the problem also comes in. And so after looking at all this, I decided that I will conclude my remarks not necessarily from the paper I've drafted and sent in, but by crafting it around what Brian said on on Tuesday when we started, and what we heard again all through this. So I am saying that Africa currently finds itself at a very pivotal juncture in both political and economic terms. It is perceived no longer as solely a peripheral development challenge, that the continent has now ascended to a central role in global strategic considerations. And these considerations include economics, politics, technology, energy security, and demographic planning. That with the youngest population that we have heard about, the Kenyans demonstrated that, Tanzania, Madagascar, abundant mineral resources, which we have talked about, significant energy, renewable energy prospects, the burgeoning urban centers we have seen here, and the increasingly aggressive regional integration initiative after. Africa is attracting unprecedented international attention. So from Beijing to Brussels to Washington to Riyadh, global stakeholders increasingly regard Africa as essential to future global growth, climate transition, supply chain diversification, international security. And I think this is what is giving that confluence of attraction, competition, strategic pursuit that has led Africa to be metaphorically dubbed the world's wanted star boy. However, this surge in global interest is not inherently beneficial. While it presents substantial opportunities, it also poses significant risks. Africa's elevated profile has the potential to accelerate industrialization, that is positive, attract investment, positive, facilitate technological transfer, doubtful, but good, positive, enhance global negotiating power, which is what we are trying to do, but conversely, it may also intensify elite capture. And that is what some of our leaders get into power for. Amplifying corruption, exacerbating political polarization, inviting external manipulation, and straining already fragile institutions. So, for me as a student and scholar in governance, I am saying that without robust governance frameworks, and global engagement could become a double-edged sword, entrenching asymmetrical partnerships and reinforcing structural dependence rather than catalyzing transformative economic and political norms. So, while Africa is increasingly becoming prominent on the global stage, it's indicative of the structural transformation that is reshaping what is happening, and that is good. However, these transformations are driven to mean, I think, by 5 integrative forces. 1, the rapid demographic growth of Africa. We are told that Africa will almost reach 2.5 billion by 2050. We'll be close to Beijing, China. That is one of the driving forces. The second one, accelerated urbanization, is taking place in Africa. 3, strategic natural resources. We talked about it here. 4, digital leapfrogging. We've been discussing that. But more importantly, I think for me, is enhanced regional integration. So collectively, if we put this together, These are the factors that should elucidate why Africa is now perceived as the world's wanted star boy, a highly sought-after partner in global markets, diplomacy, and innovation. But like my namesake said, what is Africa supposed to do in this situation? And I just look at one or two. Strengthening regional integration. And one of them is this African Continental Free Trade area, which represents one of the most ambitious integration initiatives aimed at solving an African problem. It's the biggest since the establishment of the European Union. Statistics says it has united about 1.3 billion people into a single market with a GDP that exceeds 3.4 trillion. And I think this can help this African agency from the inside. Investment, intellectual property, competition, digital marketing. These are the issues we should be looking at. My colleague, the professor, has already talked about Africa Agenda 2063. I will not do that so as to save time for discussion. But for me, I think that is the second arm of the agency. We have a homegrown solution with Africa Agenda 2063. Can African leaders and continent and scholars, NGOs, focus and lend their voices to amplify this agenda so that we mainstream them into whatever we do? And we have priorities that we can now market when we engage. In conclusion, Africa currently finds itself at a significant inflection point, one characterized not by external perception of vulnerability, but by undeniable structural strength. And that's why we are the star boy. The continent's youthful demographic, burgeoning urban centers, critical minerals, digital innovation, and unprecedented strides to regional integration render Africa essential to global economic transformation, technological advances, and transition to green energy. This is not merely a fleeting moment. I think it is significant structural reconfiguration of the priorities of the continent, in which Africa now no longer is just peripheral, but is becoming pivotal. That's why the North, the South, seeks after us. However, this strategical potential, which Brian talked about and Gabriel has talked about, alone does not ensure successful outcomes. The very forces that elevate Africa to a position of global significance also expose it to heightened geopolitical competition, elite capture, environmental challenges, governance vulnerabilities. Consequently, the continent's figure will hinge on the world's desire for Africa. But not only that, it will only be on the efficacy with which African leaders, scholars, NGOs navigate this period of increased attention. African nations must not only protect, let me try to paraphrase Brian, must not only try to protect their maize from the goats outside, but also must not allow the rats to destroy the maize in the granary within. That is the AFTA and Africa Agenda 2063. Good governance characterized by transparency, accountability, digital enablement, regional coordination, and a focus on youth is a critical factor that will determine whether Africa emerges as a global actor with agency, remains a target for opportunities, or it remains as a target for opportunistic attraction and extraction. Africa's accent is tangible. It is quantifiable. It is irreversible. Nevertheless, realizing this potential necessitates purposeful leadership that is prepared to implement reforms commensurate with the scale of the opportunities that this attraction offers. The decision made today will dictate whether Africa will influence the course in the 21st century or be shaped by it. So, for me, the imperative to act boldly, coherently, and assertively is immediate. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Silly me, I didn't realize I had two Gabriels on the panel. I should have made a joke about that, but okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, Prof. I do agree that this is indeed a pivotal moment for Africa, but the question remains, what quality or what type of leadership do we need to help us capitalize on this pivotal moment, and where do we find this leadership in the first place? Okay, so thank you to my panelists for your brilliant presentation. Now we're going into Q&A. How much time do we still have, Prof? Okay. 10 minutes. 12 minutes, okay. Oh, wow, okay. I didn't even finish my sentence. All right. So there are quite a number of questions in the room. I will start with the lady and then go up that way. So we take 2, 3 each. A batch of 3. Okay, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My question is for Prof. Jonathan. I heard you made a remark. I'm not sure if I heard properly, but you said, what happens if there's no funding come 2026? Is that what you said? So my question is, should it happen that Africa just decides to work on their own, what are the risks of us deciding to lead things on our own, like Prof just said, with leadership, what type of leadership do we need? And with Africa having all the corruption and all the wrong things, bad things happening, what happens then if Africa just decides, as in, we are doing things on our own? Or we do still continue with partnerships, but we decide that we don't wait for anybody, because I think Africa has a problem with confidence. We have all the research, we have all the knowledge, but we don't implement. What happens then if we do decide to do things tomorrow?
All right, thank you very much. Who's next? Yes, he's next. You change your mind? Okay. Can I see the hands, please? Okay.
Thank you, panel. My question is also for Professor Makuwira. I'm just curious as to what ideologies you identify in Trumpism, or that form Trumpism, and also your views on the current, within the same question, the rise in Christian nationalism, how it influences Trumpism and its the U.S.'s engagement, particularly with Nigeria right now, and Israel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. One more for this batch.
Thanks. My question is to Professor Makuwira. Professor, you're using a very curious phrase, elephant in the room, in reference to Donald Trump as an impediment to Africa's quest to realize Agenda 2063. Aren't you outsourcing responsibility for Africa's internal contradictions? Isn't Trump inviting us to rethink issues like aid industry, public health, education, security, that are heavily funded by external actors? Isn't he, in a way, inviting us to regain our sovereignty? We should be disrupting from this end, from the periphery. The disruption is coming from the center. Why do you have a problem with that? Thank you.
Okay, I see Prof has got 3 questions to him. Let's see, are there questions for other panelists? Okay, let's take that, please.
Thank you very much. Mine is to Prof. Gabriel Moti. I think in your closing remarks, you mentioned some of the recommendations perhaps, and one thing that I sort of highlighted there was youth, and I think it was only just introduced now, right? I think maybe from the observation from the past 3 days, one thing that we can all agree in terms of observation is there's lack of youth within this engagement. And I think speaking about, I think one of the things that are sort of been spoken too much about is the Agenda 2063. And you know, how are we rethinking our leadership? How are we rethinking good governance? And maybe on that note, how are we involving the youth into that conversation, particularly thinking 2063? We're thinking those people are the ones that will be driving the very objectives that were defined in when the agenda was made in 2013. So I'm just curious to say, what are sort of the intentional institutions that are directly involved in bringing the youth into these conversations? I mean, for example, we are at Witwatersrand, and you'd anticipate there will be a lot of involvement of the young people from this institution in particular, but that is not reflected in that. So from maybe the panelists and Prof having mentioned something about the youth, what are sort of those direct steps that are taken to bring the young people into the fold? Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the other panelists? I think Prof. Makumvira is saturated. Okay, so I would pose a question to Dr. Gabriel. My question is, when we talk about the great things that collectively Central Africa can achieve, how do you see the region navigating the dynamics between what happens domestically and what happens regionally? So how do you deal or navigate through the security dynamics of the region in order to achieve the collectivism that you have today said is the key to unlocking Central Africa's potential in the region? So I think we'll start with Prof. Makuwira, and then we'll go to Prof. Gabriel Moti, and then we'll come to Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you very much. Can I say that this is a conversation, so I might have to throw one of the questions back to the audience so that we can have a good conversation. But let me start by a question for my brother, Weston. Look, it sounds very contradictory indeed, but when I referred Trump as an elephant in the room, basically what I'm trying to say is there is something unique emerging from Trumpism that we need to pay attention to without necessarily demonizing it. Because if we are pushed to rethink what has been our traditional way of thinking, to think differently, then this elephant in the room is a good elephant in the room. A good example is saying, okay, I'll cut aid through USAID, is to push African countries to say, you guys have enough resources. You don't need to beg, to be beggars. Now, it's incumbent upon us, knowing full well how endowed we are with resources, that we need to do something. So there is a good in this particular Trumpism, but the question is, what are we doing? Biblically, there was a question. Sorry, I respect all religious faiths. But if you recall, there was this question, what do you have? And there was, oh, we have 2 fish here or 3 loaves of bread there. Okay, fine, let's start from there. But for Africa, if we continuously asked ourselves, what do we have? The answer is not difficult to find. We have huge arable land. We have resources. Everything is right here. But the question, what is it that makes us to be a continent of poverty above ground and richness below ground? That's the biggest question that we have to ask. Let me go to what ideologies are in this. Now listen, I have no answer what ideology. Perhaps as we go along, we might give it a name. But for now, we have something that resembles an ideology. In other ways, a shift in the way of thinking and reordering issues politically, economically, culturally, etc. Whatever that is, whether we're going to call it an ideology or not, but let's admit, something is happening through Trump that we need to pay attention to. In other words, can you think differently? And if it can, that one day we may say we have an ideology called, like we do with Karl Marx and others. We might do the same. Let me come back to you. What are the risks if we say from 2026, no more aid from anywhere? Is it free for all? The answer is yes or no. Perhaps yes is perhaps being too harsh to ourselves. But isn't that going to be a good platform for African leadership to begin thinking differently? And indeed, given that we have now the so-called Gen Z, or whatever we call them, who are paying attention to every single detail of our leadership and challenging them and shifting them, it will be only foolish leaders who will pay a blind ear to that kind of movement, because the next thing, they'll be out. And so at least we have comfort. We can take comfort in that kind of movement that is now very visible before us, the new generation. Some of us will be retiring very soon, but even that will not retire because we're still in the academy. We'll be writing, documenting, and suggesting like we're doing in this particular conference.
Thank you very much. Let me look at the youth issue you raised from a different angle. From my own engagement with youth, because I teach in a university, and mostly are youth. The undergraduate, even the graduate students, a lot of them are youth. And I've been engaging with them for more than 20-something years. And even on the social aspect, I have an NGO that is looking at governance, leadership, and mentoring for youth. And so my concern is this. Yes, the Gen Z, the youths are not happy with what we, the elder ones, are doing and would want a change. But I have not seen strategic positioning by the youth. That is my concern. So in Kenya, if you say Ruto must go, who takes over from Ruto? You want to leave a vacuum? You can't do that in governance. You can't do that in government. In Madagascar, they did it. They had no leader. The military has taken over. In Nigeria, we had the ACSUS. There was no leader. So the youth ended being killed. They didn't win. That's why I like the Ugandans. They have Bobby Wine. They are rallying around him. If they succeed in pushing Museveni away, maybe Bobby Wine will be the one they will vote into power. And he's a youth. I think that's the strategy we should be looking at. Because governance, leadership doesn't allow for vacuum. Somebody else will come, and he may be worse than the person you want to chase out. So you must have your own plan and see how you put him or her there. I think that is what I'll talk about the youth in Africa and all the process that we're seeing. But beyond that, we need to also mentor them, give them positions of responsibility in governance, even in academics, so that they learn and are able to do that. And I think I may just, because you mentioned Nigeria, I just want to say something. The Trump elephant in what do you call it?
In the room.
In the room. You see, for 15 years or more, we have had extreme terrorism in Nigeria. For me, people say Muslims are being killed, Christians are being killed. That is not the debate. Nigerian citizens are being killed. And from my own political economy analysis, the elite have used it to win election after election. We will end terrorism. Oh, so Jonathan was there. Jonathan is weak. We don't want him. You orchestrate terrorism, kidnap schoolgirls, and make him a bad president. And you say you will come and not do what Jonathan did. The people are gullible. They give you an election. The former President Buhari comes in. Insecurity exacerbates. Tinubu says he will do away with it. He has come in 2 years. Insecurity is exacerbating. So I see it as the elite using terrorism to remain in power and recycle themselves while we suffer and are being killed. Who is killed? Not the elite. It's the poor people that are being killed. They are being rendered homeless. Their land taken are in refugee camps. Not the big boys. They are flying. Go to Nigeria, Abuja, you see jets owned by parliamentarians and governors. So that is not the issue. So if Trump now says, I will invade Nigeria, the president didn't come for G20. He said, I'm sitting back to see what I can do with terrorism at home. It jolted him. He would have been in South Africa. He had to send his vice. So something is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much for your question about how navigating the internal problems in order to promote African agency, collectivity in the region. One thing to know is that these internal problems are coming out of bad governance. Most of these problems are coming from bad governance. You know, when you look at these internal crises, Professor Gabriel was talking of terrorism in Nigeria. Terrorism also touches Central Africa, you know. When you look at the history of the rise of Boko Haram emerged as a political contested movement in the end of 1990s. So most of these crises, internal crises, arise out of political contestation. So one thing is to reform or to improve the internal governance. Second, the countries should enforce or reinforce the regional integration. You know, Central Africa has started reinforcing its regional integration because some of these countries are reluctant to this aspect of regional integration because of not only the bad governance that that is mostly found in these countries, but some of Central Africa have started reinforcing this regional integration by, you know, suppressing the free movement of people and goods. With my Cameroonian passport, I can move in more than 6 countries in Central Africa. Mm-hmm. You know, they have to open it more. We have to go above, you know, the CEMAC region and cover all the ACSUS region, which is counts about 11 countries, though Rwanda decided to withdraw last year. You see, because of this aspect of bad governance, and so I think the country should reform their internal governance and all these issues. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists, for your very insightful presentation, and thank you to the audience.